Welcome everyone to Things Around 8. Dear friends, in this video we will talk about the threat made by Vladimir Putin against South Korea, saying that if the South Koreans supply weapons to Ukraine, the Russian response will be very unpleasant. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bells so you don't miss any news. During Putin's historic visit to North Korea, the first time in 24 years that the Russian leader has traveled to that country, many treaties were signed involving the strengthening of commercial ties between the two most sanctioned nations on the planet. A measure that aims to circumvent the harsh sanctions imposed by the West. But important strategic military pacts were also signed, such as an agreement to supply North Korean weapons and ammunition to Russia. Something very important for Putin to be able to continue sustaining his effort to invade Ukraine. But there was one agreement that attracted special attention. I am referring to the security pact that requires, in the event of aggression, that both countries support each other. In other words, if Russia is attacked, North Korea must send military support, and vice versa. This military pact obviously directly affects South Korea, which has been at war with North Korea since 1950. In 1953, the war was temporarily paused, and an armistice was signed that year. However, in practical terms, the state of war between the two Koreas is still in force. Therefore, any military pact signed by North Korea directly affects South Korea, and it was precisely in response to this Russian-North Korean military pact that South Korea announced on Thursday, June 21st, that it is considering changing its policy on selling weapons to nations involved in wars. A measure that could open the door to the shipment of South Korean weapons and ammunition to Ukraine. Thanks to its strong political, industrial, technological and military partnership with the United States, South Korea is now one of the most advanced countries in terms of military technology, producing, under license, a wide range of advanced American weapons, but also designing and building locally many weapons systems, mainly armored vehicles and artillery, which are precisely the types of weapons that Ukraine needs most now. Vladimir Putin, well aware of the advanced level of South Korean weapons and the risk that these weapons pose to his invasion of Ukraine, protested very vehemently against South Korea's threat with a response that, according to him, will be unpleasant, but he did not go into detail about what that unpleasant response would be. According to a statement issued by the office of South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, South Korea considers it absurd that two countries known for launching wars of aggression and invasion should sign pacts of mutual military support, precisely at one of the most tense moments in the world. At the UN, South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il described the pact signed by Russia and North Korea as deplorable, as it violates many of the sanctions that the UN itself approved against the North Korean dictatorship. For South Korea, it is unacceptable that a member with a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, which is the case of Russia, is acting precisely to circumvent sanctions that were approved and imposed by the UN and the Security Council itself. In other words, Russia is violating sanctions that it itself approved against North Korea. Chang Ho-shin, National Security Advisor to the South Korean presidency, said that given the violations of UN sanctions and the risk that this pact poses to South Korea, his country should reconsider the issue of sending weapons to Ukraine to help the country defend itself against the Russian invasion. Although South Korea has roundly condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the country, citing domestic laws that prevent the supply of weapons to nations in conflict, has limited itself to providing financial, humanitarian and political support for Ukrainian defense, but without the involvement of direct military aid. During the Cold War, the specter of the resumption of the Korean War was ever present in South Korea, leading the South Koreans to prepare for a conflict that they saw as inevitable. This preparation involved, in addition to the purchase of Western weapons, mainly from the United States, also the development of its own defense industry. This effort has resulted in huge stockpiles of weapons, vehicles and ammunition spread across South Korean territory, and also in the development of one of the most advanced defense industries in the world, with the South Koreans producing their own version of the F-16 fighter locally and customizing their own version of the F-15 fighter with 40% local components. In addition to operating other advanced fighter models such as the F-35 and having developed their own light attack fighter, the F-A-50. But the weapons that may really interest the Ukrainians are the armored vehicles and artillery produced by the South Koreans. In the area of armored vehicles, The highlight is the K1, produced between the 1980s and 1990s. A heavy armored vehicle, weighing more than 50 tons, it can be armed with 105 and 120 mm cannons. Around 1,500 have been produced, with hundreds being decommissioned at the moment to be replaced by the new K2 Black Panther armored vehicles. Therefore, theoretically, South Korea would have hundreds of K1 armored vehicles that could be sent to Ukraine. In the area of artillery, the highlight is the K55, the local version of the M109A2, a 155 mm self-propelled howitzer. In the 1980s and 1990s, more than 1,000 of these howitzers were produced, which are now being replaced by the K9 Thunder. This means that, like the K1 armored vehicles, the K55 howitzer can also be sent to Ukraine in large quantities. And we cannot forget about ammunition, as South Korea has depots with many millions of artillery shells, all of them compatible with the NATO standard, which is the one that Ukraine currently uses most, and which can therefore also be easily sent to Kiev. So, unlike North Korea, which can only send Russia old ammunition that has been in stock for decades, South Korea can send Ukraine very modern ammunition, armored vehicles, and howitzers. And that is why Putin is reacting so angrily. But it is always important to remember that the United States and South Korea also have a full military alliance pact, which means that if this unpleasant response that Putin has promised to give South Korea involves some kind of military attack, Russia will open a new front in the Far East to directly compete with its endless war in Ukraine. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any news.